I'd always dreamed of a quiet life, and my 5-acre plot on the edge of Willow Creek delivered. The land, fringed with wild sunflowers and buzzing with my 3 beehives, felt like a sanctuary. My collie Pixel chased fireflies at dusk, and the creek along the property's eastern boundary babbled softly, its waters feeding my garden. For 2 years it was perfect. Then Karen Davis moved in next door. Karen, with her platinum blonde bob and clipboard perpetually in hand, was the HOA's self-appointed enforcer. Our neighborhood, a loose collection of rural homes, didn't need an HOA. Most of us valued freedom over rules, but Karen saw untapped potential. She'd already bullied neighbors into painting mailboxes regulation gray and fining Mrs. Larson for her unsightly rose trellis. When her gaze turned to my creek, I braced for trouble. The creek ran through an easement, legally shared but on my titled land. I used it to irrigate my tomatoes and water the bees. One Saturday, I woke to the clank of metal stakes. Karen, in a neon visor, was directing 2 workers to plant a chain-link fence along the creek, slicing off my access. A sign reading HOA property hung crookedly on a post. "Morning, Karen," I called, keeping my tone light. Pixel trotted behind me, tail wagging. "That fence is on my land. The surveyor's plat shows the easement's mine." Karen's eyes narrowed. "The HOA voted to secure this waterway for community use," she said, waving a hand as if I were a gnat. "You don't own the creek." I fetched the plat from my study, a crisp document with the county seal. It clearly marked the easement as part of my deed. "This says otherwise," I said, handing it to her. "You're welcome to check with the county." She didn't look at it. Instead, she folded her arms. "We'll see about that. The HOA has authority here." Her tone dripped with certainty, like she'd already won. I wasn't about to let her steamroll me. That afternoon, I called Elliot, a lawyer friend who specialized in property disputes. His voice, calm and gravelly, reassured me over the phone. "Send me the plat and easement docs," he said. "I'll draft a cease and desist letter by Monday." Elliot's letter, delivered via certified mail, outlined the easement's legal protections and demanded Karen remove the fence within 48 hours. I expected her to grumble but comply. Instead, she doubled down. Tuesday morning, a sheriff's cruiser rolled up my driveway, kicking up dust. Pixel barked, and I stepped onto the porch, heart pounding. Deputy Rogers, a lanky man with a handlebar mustache, tipped his hat. "Got a call about a property dispute," he said, glancing at Karen, who stood by her mailbox, arms crossed triumphantly. "Mind if I take a look?" I handed him the plat, easement agreement, and a copy of Elliot's letter. Karen thrust forward a crumpled HOA resolution claiming the creek as community property. Rogers skimmed both, his brow furrowing at Karen's paper. "This HOA document isn't notarized," he said. "County records trump it." He turned to me. "Your plat checks out. The easement's yours." Then to Karen, "Ma'am, you'll need to remove that fence. Trespassing on titled land's a problem." He paused, adding, "Have a pleasant day." Karen's face reddened, her lips a thin line. I expected her to argue, but she just spun on her heel and marched back to her house, the HOA sign still dangling on her fence. Pixel nudged my hand, and I scratched his ears, relieved but uneasy. Most people would have stopped there, embarrassed by the sheriff's ruling, but Karen wasn't most people. That evening, I caught her glaring from her porch, phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and sharp. The fence stayed up, its stakes glinting defiantly in the moonlight. My bees hummed restlessly, and Pixel growled softly, sensing what I did. This was far from over. I sat on my porch, the creek's murmur barely audible over my racing thoughts. Karen's next move would be bigger, uglier. I'd need more than a plat to protect my land and my peace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I resolved to fight smarter. Tomorrow I'd call Elliot again. Tonight I'd watch the creek, Pixel at my side, guarding what was mine. Karen's fence still stood, a jagged scar across my creek view, mocking Deputy Rogers' order to remove it. For 2 weeks I waited for her to comply, but her porch light burned late, and her glares across the property line grew sharper. Pixel, my collie, sensed the unease, his ears twitching at every rustle. The bees in my hives buzzed restlessly, as if they knew trouble was coming. They weren't wrong. One Thursday, I returned from town to a scene of destruction. My wooden fence along the creek was sliced in 3 places, splintered boards dangling like broken teeth. Tire marks gouged the muddy bank, and one of my beehives lay toppled, its frame scattered, honey oozing into the grass. The air smelled of sweet ruin. Worst of all, Pixel limped toward me, whimpering, a nail embedded in his paw from a crude nailboard hidden near the fence line. My stomach churned anger, not fear. At the vet, Dr. Patel removed the nail and prescribed antibiotics, warning me to watch for infection. "This wasn't an accident," she said, eyeing the rusty nail. Back home, I cradled Pixel, his soft whines stealing my resolve. Karen had crossed a line, and I was done playing defense. I ordered 4 motion sensor cameras online. each with night vision and alerts that would ping my phone every 10 seconds until silenced. By Saturday, they were mounted, 2 on the creek fence, 1 by the hives, 1 near the driveway. I also called Nora Beltran, a surveyor recommended by Elliot, my lawyer. Nora, with her steel-toed boots and no-nonsense braid, arrived Monday. "I've dealt with HOA types like your neighbor," she said, hammering fluorescent stakes into my property corners. She affixed laminated placards to each, citing state laws on tampering penalties. "Let's see them try to move these." That night at 1:13 a.m., my phone erupted with alerts. I bolted upright, pixels stirring at my feet. The camera feed glowed on my screen. 2 figures in hoodies skulked near the creek, yanking Nora's stakes with gloved hands. One tossed them into the water, where they sank with a faint splash. The taller figure wielded bolt cutters, snipping my repaired fence wire. Moonlight caught the shorter one's hair, platinum blonde, unmistakable. Karen. The other, lanky and hunched, moved with a familiar swagger. I called Deputy Rogers, forwarding the footage. By dawn, he was at my door, his cruiser's lights flickering. "Recognize the tall one," he said, squinting at a still from my camera. "Chandler Hayes, local troublemaker, busted him for petty theft last year." Rogers radioed for a warrant, citing criminal mischief and trespassing. "We'll handle this." At 6 a.m., Rogers and 2 deputies knocked on Chandler's trailer. His body cam, later shared with me, caught him in pajama pants, bleary-eyed. "I was asleep all night," Chandler protested. Rogers held up my camera still, Chandler mid-grimace, bolt cutters gleaming. "Wanna try that again?" Rogers asked. Chandler's jaw clamped shut. Karen's arrest followed. In her garage, deputies found Nora's stolen stakes, a can of spray paint matching the red streaks on my no trespassing signs, and a pair of muddy gloves. Karen claimed Chandler stored tools there without her knowledge, but Rogers wasn't buying it. "You're on camera, ma'am," he said, cuffing her. The footage showed her tossing a stake, her face clear as day. Both were booked at the county jail. Karen, with her HOA connections, made bond by noon, her lawyer already spinning excuses. Chandler, on probation for a 2021 check kiting scheme, wasn't so lucky. A no-bond hold kept him behind bars. I watched Karen's SUV speed off, her fence still standing, now a monument to her hubris. Pixel slept by the hearth, his paw bandaged but healing. The bees, one hive down, still flew their steady patrols. I sat on my porch replaying the camera footage, the creek's murmur faint behind Karen's digital scowl. Rogers had her dead to rights, but I knew she'd fight dirty. This wasn't over, it was just getting started. Karen's arrest should have brought relief, but her SUV still roared past my driveway daily, her bond letting her roam free. Chandler, locked up on a probation hold, wasn't a threat, but Karen's icy stares from her porch kept me on edge. Pixel, his paw healing, growled at her shadow. My bees worked their rebuilt hive, but the creek felt tainted, its banks still scarred by her tire marks. I needed answers. Why had she pushed so hard? Elliot, my lawyer, suggested auditing the HOA's books. Karen's illegal gate, a $3,500 chain-link monstrosity, hadn't been cheap. We subpoenaed the HOA's financial records, expecting a quick trace. Instead, we uncovered a bombshell, cashier's check signed by Chandler, drawn from the HOA's reserve fund. Digging deeper, Elliot found $46,900 in checks for grounds improvements, projects that never existed. New sod, never laid. Tree trimming, not a branch cut. The gate was just the tip of Chandler's fraud. The HOA board, a mix of retirees and young families, was horrified. At an emergency meeting, they voted unanimously to press charges. Detective Miriam Page from the county's white-collar crime unit took the lead. She raided Chandler's trailer, seizing his laptop. It held a goldmine, forged receipts, fake meeting minutes, and a word template for neon green approved stamps used on sham invoices. Most damning, $12,000 labeled consulting fees had been wired to Karen's personal account, deposited the day after my beehive was smashed. Karen lawyered up fast. James Hall, a $600 an hour defense attorney, stonewalled Page's questions, claiming Karen was a victim of Chandler's schemes. But Chandler, facing felony fraud charges atop his probation violation, had no loyalty. Desperate, he cut a deal with the DA, testify against Karen for a reduced sentence. His plea hearing was set for next month, but his statement to Page was already in. Karen had masterminded the land grab, promising him a slice of my creekfront property once the HOA annexed it. The trial came fast. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, its pews packed with HOA members. The prosecutor played my Ring camera footage. Karen and Chandler, 12:47 a.m., loading rebar into her SUV, the timestamp matching the night Nora's survey stakes vanished. Bank records showed Karen's consulting deposits, and Chandler's testimony was brutal. "She told me to handle the dirty work," he said, voice flat. Said the HOA would back her. Karen's defense crumbled. Hall argued she'd been misled by Chandler, but the jury wasn't swayed. After 6 hours, they delivered guilty verdicts: felony conspiracy, theft, criminal mischief, and misdemeanor trespass. Karen's bond was revoked. She'd serve 18 months with $32,000 restitution to me for damages and $46,900 to the HOA. Chandler's probation violation triggered an automatic 18-month sentence for his 2021 fraud, with a 4-year plea deal for the new charges, parole possible in 2. A 5-year no-contact order barred both from my land. As Karen was led away, her platinum hair dulled under fluorescent lights, I caught her eye. I waved, not out of malice, but because it felt final. The creek was mine again, the bees would hum, and Pixel could run free. Outside, the air tasted cleaner, though I knew Karen's allies might stir trouble. Elliot clapped my shoulder. Small win, he said, but we're not done. Back home, I sat by the creek, Pixel at my side. The water ran clear, but Karen's fence posts still jutted from the mud, a reminder of battles won and those yet to come. I'd need to stay sharp. For now, though, the sun warmed my face and the bees danced. It was enough. The courtroom's echo faded, but Karen's glare lingered in my mind, sharp as the nails that pierced Pixel's paw. Her 18-month sentence in Chandler's jail time secured my creek, yet the land bore scars, gouged mud, a shattered beehive, a fence still half-standing. I walked the property at dawn, Pixel trotting beside me, his bandage gone but his gait cautious. The bees, down to 2 hives, worked tirelessly, their hum a quiet promise. I needed to rebuild, not just for me, but for them. The HOA, once Karen's weapon, became my first ally. A new board led by Mrs. Larson, whose rose trellis had survived Karen's fines, sent a letter of apology. Enclosed was a $4,500 check clawed from Chandler's frozen accounts to repair my hives and fence. At their first open meeting, Larson stood, her voice steady. "We let a bully run this place," she said. "No more." Neighbors nodded, some offering me sheepish smiles. The board voted to dissolve Karen's community property rules, restoring easements to their rightful owners. My creek was officially mine again. I got to work. With the restitution funds, I hired a carpenter to clear Karen's fence, its chain links hauled away in a rattling truck. In its place, I built a greenhouse, its glass panels catching the morning sun. The air inside smelled of fresh soil and tomato starts, a sharp contrast to the honey-soaked ruin Karen left. I rebuilt the 3rd beehive frame by frame, coaxing a new swarm from a local apiary. The bees settled in, their buzz louder each day. Pixel, fully healed, chased a stray butterfly near the creek, his tail a blur. I laughed, the sound foreign after months of tension. Karen's property, once a manicured symbol of her control, sold quickly. Sprout Tomorrow, an organic farming nonprofit, bought it at auction. Their mission to turn lawns into community gardens felt like fate. I met their director, Clara, a wiry woman with dirt-streaked hands. "We heard about your fight," she said, eyeing my greenhouse. "Want to help us plant?" I hesitated, then nodded. Karen's land, her battleground, would bloom instead of bruise. The first volunteer day was a revelation. Neighbors I'd barely known arrived with shovels and seedlings. Deputy Rogers, off-duty, hauled wheelbarrows of compost, his mustache dusted with soil. Larson brought her grandkids, who squealed as they planted zucchini. I lent my brush cutter, its roar drowning out old grudges. By dusk, Karen's lawn was gone, replaced by raised beds, tomato vines, and a trellis for pole beans. The air smelled of turned earth and possibility. Clara raised a mason jar of lemonade, toasting new roots. I clinked my jar against hers, feeling lighter than I had in a year. That evening, I sat on my porch, Pixel curled at my feet. The creek murmured, free of Karen's stakes, its banks softening with new grass. The greenhouse glowed faintly, a beacon of what I'd built from her chaos. The bees danced their evening patrols, and I thought of the garden next door, Karen's legacy undone by community hands. It wasn't just my win, it was ours. But peace felt fragile. Karen's HOA cronies, though quiet, still lived nearby. A rumor reached me, her cousin, sniffing around county records, asking about easements. Elliot, ever vigilant, was already checking deeds. "Probably nothing," he said, but his tone was cautious. I stroked Pixel's fur, his warmth grounding me. The bees hummed, the creek flowed, and the garden grew. I fought once and won. If trouble came again, I'd be ready. For now, I savored the quiet. The sun dipped low, painting the greenhouse gold. Pixel yawned, and I smiled, my hand on his scruff. The land was ours, mine, his, the bees. We'd earned this fresh start, and I'd guard it fiercely. Tomorrow, I'd plant basil in the greenhouse. Tonight, I'd listen to the creek, its song louder than Karen's ever was. The creek rang clear again, its banks softened by wild grasses, no longer marred by Karen's tire marks or chain-link scars. My greenhouse stood proud, its glass catching dawn's light, while the bees, 3 hives strong, hummed with purpose. Pixel, my collie, bounded through the sunflowers, his paw healed, his joy a mirror of my own. Karen's 18-month sentence and Chandler's jail time felt like a distant storm, but the land still whispered of battles won. I'd fought for this peace, and now something better was blooming. Sprout Tomorrow, the organic farming nonprofit that bought Karen's property, had turned her manicured lawn into a canvas for change. Clara, their director, invited me to consult on planting native pollinators, milkweed for monarchs, coneflowers for bees. The irony wasn't lost on me. Karen, who'd wielded HOA rules like a scepter, would have hated her land becoming a communal Eden. I agreed to help, not for spite, but because it felt right. The first volunteer day was a Saturday, the air crisp with spring's promise. Neighbors gathered on what was once Corinne's front yard, their boots sinking into soil where her pristine grass had rained. Clara handed out shovels, her dirt-streaked grin infectious. I brought my brush cutter, its roar clearing patches for raised beds. Deputy Rogers, off duty, hauled mulch bags, his mustache flecked with sawdust. "Never thought I'd be gardening here," he chuckled, nodding at Corinne's old mailbox, now painted with sunflowers by Larson's grandkids. The new HOA board joined in. Mrs. Larson, now chair, planted zucchini with her daughter, while others staked tomato vines. Neighbors who'd once ducked Corinne's finds shared seedlings and stories. A young couple new to the block asked about my beehives, their eyes bright with curiosity. I told them about the honey, the creek, the fight. They listened, then offered me a cutting from their lavender. "For your greenhouse," they said. I took it, my throat tight. By noon, Corinne's lawn was unrecognizable. Raised beds brimmed with kale, peppers, and herbs. A trellis promised pole beans by summer. Clara unveiled a sign, "Willow Creek Community Garden." The crowd cheered, and I felt a pang, not just for the victory, but for what it meant. Corinne's control, her stakes, her gate, all gone, replaced by roots and shared sweat. Pixel nosed a stray clod, tail wagging as if he approved. That evening I walked the garden's edge, the creek's murmur blending with crickets. The sun dipped low, gilding the beds where Corinne's grass once grew. I thought of her in prison, her platinum hair dimmed by cell block lights, her restitution checks trickling in $58 a month, a symbolic drip. Chandler, too, had reached out, his letter from jail tucked in my desk. His paralegal studies and orchard sketch were a gesture, not absolution. I'd written back, mentioning the sunflower's height, leaving the rest unsaid. Clara caught me staring at the garden. "You made this possible," she said, handing me a jar of early honey from my hives, labeled Willow Creek Gold. I shrugged, but her words settled deep. The fight had been mine, but the victory was ours. The bees, the creek, the garden, they thrived because we'd stood together. A week later, a restitution check arrived, $200 from the state's victim fund, Corinne's wages garnished. It wouldn't rebuild a hive, but it bought basil seeds for the greenhouse. Rumors of her cousin's easement claims had fizzled. Elliot's deed checks found nothing. The HOA, now transparent, sent monthly updates, their reserve funds slowly rebuilding. Small wins, but they added up. I sat on my porch, Pixel at my feet, the garden scent, earth, herbs, life carried on the breeze. The greenhouse glowed, the bees danced, and the creek sang. Corinne's legacy was buried under tomato vines, her control undone by community hands. I scratched Pixel's ears, his warmth grounding me. This was full circle, from her chaos to our triumph, from her fence to our fields. The fight had changed me, sharpened my resolve, but it also showed what we could build. The garden wasn't just a win, it was a promise. As the stars emerged, I raised Clara's honey jar to the sky, a quiet toast to the land, the bees, and the peace we'd earned. Tomorrow we'd plant more, tonight we'd rest. October's golden light bathed the creek, its waters free of Corinne's shadow. My greenhouse thrived, bees humming, Pixel darting through sunflowers. The fight, Corinne's fence, her vandalism, her downfall, felt like a faded scar healed by time and toil. The Willow Creek Community Garden, once her lawn, now burst with life, a testament to what we'd built. Sprout tomorrow hosted a harvest dinner on Corinne's former land, tables laden with garden bounty, roasted butternut squash, garlic honey carrots, heirloom tomato bruschetta. Neighbors laughed, passing plates, their faces soft in lantern glow. Clara, the nonprofit's director, raised a glass to roots and redemption. I smiled, deflecting her nod to my role. The victory wasn't mine alone, it was the community. My barn, built from Corinne's reclaimed fence posts, stood finished, its permitted beams a quiet rebuke to her chaos. It housed tools, dreams, and memories of battles won. Pixel napped in its shade, his fur warm under my hand. The garden scent, earth, herbs, hope mingled with the creek's song. Corinne's restitution checks, $58 monthly, were symbolic, not substantial. Chandler's letter, unanswered, spoke of growth. I didn't need their remorse. The land, the bees, the community, they were enough. As seasons turned, I'd plant more, build more, live more. Pixel and I had our peace, hard-earned and ours to keep. The creek's song was louder now, unshackled from Corinne's chains. Its waters caught October's golden light, weaving through grasses that had reclaimed her tire marks. My greenhouse stood like a sentinel, its glass cradling tomato vines and basil, while 3 beehives thrummed with life. Pixel, my collie, darted through sunflowers, his one singered paw strong, his bark a hymn to our hard-won peace. Corinne's vandalism, her fence, her courtroom scowl, they were ghosts, fatting against the land's stubborn renewal. I'd fought for this, not just for me, but for Pixel, the bees, and the creek that tied us together. Standing on my porch, I breathed in the crisp air, heavy with earth and possibility. The saga wasn't over, it never truly is, but it had turned a page. Sprout tomorrow's harvest dinner was the community's victory lap. Corinne's former lawn, once a sterile monument to her control, now bloomed with raised beds of kale, zucchini, and peppers. Tables lined the garden, draped in checkered cloths, laden with dishes born of its soil. Roasted butternut squash glazed with my bees, honey, garlic, carrots, heirloom tomato bruschetta kissed with basil. Lanterns swayed in the breeze, casting a warm glow over neighbors who'd once cowered under Karen's HOA fines. Mrs. Larson, now HOA chair, passed a bowl of green beans, her smile free of the old fear. Deputy Rogers, his uniform swapped for flannel, carved a pumpkin for the kids, his mustache twitching with a grin. Clara, Sprout Tomorrow's director, stood on a makeshift stage, a pallet draped with burlap. "This garden," she said, her voice carrying over the chatter, "is proof of what we can do together." One neighbor stood up to a bully, and we all grew from it. Eyes turned to me, and I shifted, scratching Pixel's ears to dodge the spotlight. Clara raised a mason jar of cider. To Roots, Redemption, and Willow Creek. The crowd echoed her toast, jars clinking, laughter rising like the bees' hum. I sipped the cider, tart and sweet, but deflected Clara's praise later. "It was all of us," I said. She squeezed my arm, her dirt-streaked hand warm. "You started it." The dinner wasn't flawless. A shadow lingered in Tom Hargrove, a grizzled retiree who'd been Karen's ally. He sat at a corner table, arms crossed, his plate untouched. As Clara spoke, he muttered to a neighbor, loud enough for me to catch. "This garden on stolen land. Karen had rights." Heads turned, murmurs rippling. My pulse quickened, Pixel sensing my tension with a low whine. I'd faced Karen's lies before, but Tom's words stung, a reminder of her lingering poison. Larson stood, her voice calm but firm. "Tom, the county records are clear. The easement was never Karen, and this land was bought fair at auction." Rogers nodded, adding, "Court settled it. Conspiracy, theft, Karen's guilty." Clara stepped in softer. "This garden, for everyone, Tom. Plant with us, heal with us." The crowd waited tense, Tom's jaw tight, but he grabbed a carrot stick, chewing slowly. "Maybe," he grunted. It wasn't surrender, but it was enough. Neighbors exhaled, passing by, the moment diffused. I met Clara's eyes, grateful. Unity wasn't perfect, but it was stronger than Karen's echo. My barn, finished that week, was my personal closure. Built from Karen's reclaimed fence posts, its beams bore the scars of her stakes, now sanded smooth and varnished. It stood beside the greenhouse, housing tools, hay, and a corner for my beekeeping gear. I'd framed it myself with help from Rogers and a few neighbors, its permit proudly filed, unlike Karen's gate. Inside, it smelled of cedar and promise. Pixel claimed a sunny patch by the door, napping as I stacked jars of honey, each labeled Willow Creek Gold. The greenhouse, steps away, burst with greens, its air thick with life. One evening I sat in the barn, Pixel's head on my knee, watching the creek glint. The land had healed, and so had I. Loose ends tied themselves quietly. Karen's restitution checks arrived, $58 monthly, garnished from her prison wages. They never rebuild a hive, but I used one to buy marigold seeds, a nod to the bees. Chandler's letter, his second, came with a paralegal certificate and another apology. He'd sketched a pollinator meadow for the garden, a gesture I didn't trust but didn't hate. I wrote back brief: "Sunflowers are taller, keep learning." Forgiveness wasn't my goal, distance was. The HOA under Larson thrived, its books transparent, its reserve fund growing. Elliot, my lawyer, called to confirm no new easement claims had surfaced. "You're clear," he said. I hung up, relieved, the creek's murmur louder than ever. Garden's legacy stretched beyond that night. Clara shared plans: summer camp for kids, teaching composting and planting, a seed library for the county. I offered my hives for pollination workshops, picturing schoolkids in beekeeper suits, giggling as they learned. The garden wasn't just food, it was knowledge, connection, a shield against future Karens. Neighbors already talked of expanding, eyeing an empty lot nearby. I'd help, not lead. My fight had sparked this, but it belonged to Willow Creek now. As November loomed, I walked the land, Pixel at my side. The barn stood tall, its wood a quiet echo to Karen's chaos. The garden's last tomatoes hung heavy, the greenhouse glowed, and the bees prepared for winter. I thought of Tom's grumble, Karen's checks, Chandler's sketch, remnants of a storm that no longer ruled me. Pixel chased a leaf, his bark echoing, and I laughed, the sound free. The creek sang, the sun warmed my face, and I knew we built more than a garden. We built a future. I raised a mental toast to the land, the bees, the neighbors who'd become family. Tomorrow I'd plant garlic, check the hives, maybe sketch a meadow of my own. Tonight I sat by the creek, Pixel's warmth against me, the stars bright above. This was home, hard-earned and ours. We were ready for whatever came next.